And I'm going to combine these two questions, one from Ren Tawari and Huizong Guo. Well, actually, before that, Marsha Galanco. There are differences within the Asian American communities, socially, economically, and politically. How do you unite all Asian Americans, including API, and how do you connect Asian Americans as a group to stand as in unity and solidarity with other non-Asian groups?
So who's answering that? The panelists?
Anyone's welcome to answer.
It's the $1 million question again. I'm sorry.
I can start.
It's a very hard question. There is no simple way. There is no easy way to unite Asian Americans. And well, there's no simple way to unite Indians. Forget about Asian Americans. Okay. I mean, you put 4 Indians in a room, they'll form 3 different parties. Okay. And the 4th one will be like, here, I'm not going to vote for any of you. So it's not an easy thing. I wish I had an answer for you, but I think showing them the true meaning, the goal, focusing on the goal, right? What is our goal? Our goal is to have an Asian American president or an Asian American government or an Asian American leader. Focus on that goal and see how you can achieve it. Once you show the goal put the goal in front of people, they'll figure out a way to unite themselves. There are differences, but we can set them apart and focus on the goal. Bing or others, you can.
I think there's a couple ways to do this. One is the healthy way to do this is to address and fully understand the intrinsic bias that we have at socioeconomic levels, certainly ethnic lines, and certainly gender lines. But I candidly don't think we can wait for that conversation to be done, because that conversation will not happen at a universal level. To the point where we all agree on a singular canon, vernacular, and so forth. So I think in parallel to that, I think there are 2 things. One of my friends actually, who's part of the Black Lives Matter movement this week, interestingly said that maybe the policy issue that will actually unite our community is actually a policy issue that befalls another community. And to that note, I've been really inspired by all the Asians who've been really speaking up for the Black community amongst all the police brutalities that have always happened, but have been especially more visible this week. And so I think that's one. I think someone else's policy may actually help us unite. The second issue is the economy. So I know I sound, again, very sort of callous and so forth, but we are kidding ourselves if we think that money is not significant, if not principal, in sustaining any form of systemic change. I reference 2 different countries that have sort of, really popped up into prominence over the past 2 decades with this. First is Singapore, and second is the UAE. Both countries, as I think many of us know, are less than about 60 years old. So they're almost too young. They have too few yesterdays to actually be defined by any sort of structural nationalist culture. And so instead, both of them have very wisely defined their identities based on what they build tomorrow. And that is, of course, the economy. Fast forward from the past few, let's call it 10 to 15 years, Singapore has displanted every other region in Asia as the new multinational hub for Asia. Every major multinational has moved its headquarters from Hong Kong and Tokyo over to Singapore. This obviously is because of a very smart set of investments, tax incentives, and all that. But they have become a uniting power for the entire continent. The UAE similarly has done something very similar in the Middle East, where, did any of you know about Dubai 2 decades ago? The answer is probably not, right? But again, because of a set of wise economic policies, they have now become the essential hub in the Middle East, in the UAE. And so I think there's something instructive there for us. And so, if we can't unite on single policies or races, perhaps we can unite on success. And I don't just mean the success of, getting more women on boards in the C-suite or getting more Filipinos engaged in these conversations. I mean at every level, ensuring that we can continue to invest in our small and medium-sized businesses to ensure there's a system around them. One sort of very encouraging note here is about 30% of the companies that have been founded in the last decade that are worth over $500 million in this country are actually founded by at least one Asian American. So we actually have a gift in creating economic power. And I think that's probably where we begin. I'm, of course, not trying to negate all the gravity of real other policy issues. But again, I think in the absence of something that's unifying, I think that could be one of them.
In addition to, I'll kind of round it out. You've talked about the political approaches, economic approaches, and I'll talk a little bit about the grassroots approaches. I started with saying stories matter, but as a filmmaker, I don't believe for a minute that films create social justice. I think that people do. People are organized and they do it. And that the organization, you know, your coalition, Asian Americans actually have always been very organized. I mean, in the 1860s, the single largest labor strike in the United States was organized by Chinese immigrant railroad workers. So we've always been very organized. This current moment really, it reminds me in a way of the Vincent Chin case, in that in Detroit, a lot of Asian Americans actually, you know, did not see themselves as being political subjects. They saw themselves, many of them, as so-called model minorities. You know, they had, you know, jobs, sometimes professional jobs, and they thought that they had made it. And either they had not experienced racism, or they just kind of blocked it out if they had. And when Vincent Chin was murdered, and his murderers didn't serve a single day in jail, they were really awakened. They remembered, you know, what had happened in their own lives. And then they realized, you know, what was happening at the time when Asian Americans in the 1980s were disproportionately targets of hate crimes around the country. But that kind of awakening happened because people were organized. Helen Zia, who's the head of the Campaign for Justice, you know, had come out of the Asian American movement as a student activist. You know, Stuart Quo and the lawyers, the civil rights lawyers from the Asian American community who descended on Detroit and worked with the local lawyers like Jim Shimura and Eliza Chan, you know, they came out of Asian American activism, and they were already involved in the organized Asian American movement. And I think that's what's happening today, that Asian Americans are, you know, after Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, on top of, you know, this drumbeat of violence towards Black and brown people, Asian Americans, like other Americans, are shocked. But there has been a really important framing of, you know, the relationship between the anti-Asian kind of pandemic hate and the roots of racism, and this kind of how the model minority has been deployed to counter the calls for justice of other communities of color. And that comes from organization. It comes from being organized during good times and being organized, you know, in times of crises. So I think all these kinds of entry points of standing for justice meaning not just us, but justice for all, I think all these entry points are really critical.
Thank you guys so much. And all of your answers actually answered the next two questions, which was about, like, you know, what's Asian Americans' role in the Black Lives Matter movement, and, you know, and how do we kind of solve the root problem of the divide that is in the Asian American community, which is what Hui Zhongguo believes that is an economic issue of upper mobility issue than just a racial issue. So thank you for that. And I'd like to I think we have time just for this one last question from Thomas. The larger society, or the white population, describes Asian Americans as the model minority because of our success in achieving the American dream much faster than other communities. In a way, it is preferential treatment to Asian Americans by the white community over African and Latino communities. So how do we set priorities in achieving the American dreams faster, and or help African and Latino communities do the same?
I'll give a small note. I think the first step is remembering that the model minority myth is a myth. And if one of us in one ethnicity, one gender, one socioeconomic bracket has not made it, then we have all failed. So it begins with on our own. We have to make sure that all of us can actually systematically rise. And there is a way to do that, by the way, whether it's small things as a consumer and buying from local restaurants or local businesses, whether it's as big businesses, going out of your way to hire for diversity, because Asian is not just a monolithic box that you check, so forth and so on. The second piece, I think, is we have to find where we're concentric with other communities. I think we all agree that our experience of racism and systemic bias is very, very different, and one could argue less grave than those of the Black and Brown communities. That being said, I do think the solutions that we'll find are going to be highly concentric. So I'll give you a soft one within film. I think director and producer Renee is being too modest. I think film is always a progenitor, or often a progenitor in media, of societal change. Let us not forget that we saw a Black man in the Oval Office on film and TV long before we did in the actual Oval Office. Even if that movie was Fifth Element, even if that show was 24. But when you paint what is possible, because so many of us don't have great imaginations, you demonstrate what can be possible to many people, including people like Barack Hussein Obama and so forth. And so let's look to film. In film, the Latinx, Asian, and Black communities control 50% of the box office. That is half of the box office. So if we can suddenly support each other's films, suddenly, because film is still the high art, and I'm not just saying this because Renee's here, but film is still the high art in visual media, such that TV, publishing, and so forth follow it. So suddenly, if you can show that minorities are collaborating, that our stories are essential in the highest vehicle in theatrical, suddenly you're going to see that perpetuate across all media. Suddenly, if you see that opportunity perpetuate across all media, what if that opportunity could also perpetuate in the boardroom? What if that could also vernacular perpetuate into policy, so forth and so on? So again, I realize film sometimes is sort of thrown away as, you know, something frivolous, but the reality is, one, it takes all kinds. Two, is film is indelible in showing what's possible. And three, I think it shows what's possible when we can all also get together, not only for human means, but for commercial opportunity as well.
Ming, I think in terms, oh, sorry.
I just wanted to add one note. When he said that, you know, there was already a film about a Black president before we saw the president in the White House. I hope, Renee, you make another film with an Asian American as a president, so that we'll see that happen soon, or an Asian American woman as a president, please, because I would love to see that one day.
I hope it's not a fantasy.
No.
Excuse me. I think one thing about specifically the Black Lives Matter movement is, as allies, really taking leadership from that movement. I mean, you know, again, hearkening back to the Vincent Chin campaign for justice, it's the Rainbow Coalition and Jesse Jackson and other communities of color really came to support Asian Americans, following the lead of the Asian American organizers. So I think that's really critical. And the other thing, and this has been the hardest, I think, for a lot of Asian Americans, is starting with your families. It's really starting with your families. And people are, I see William is laughing. You know, it's hard to have a rational discussion, because if you look at the data and look at the history and, you know, things like, you know, as I said, housing opened up for Asian Americans during the 50s as this model minority myth was really starting to gain traction. It opened up, you know, before it opened up for African Americans. I mean, there have been, you know, 65 immigration reform. There's a lot of policies that have favored Asian Americans and, you know, given us a step up. I mean, so that's very rational, but a lot of these discussions are not rational at all. How to solve that, I don't know. But again, people.
I think we lost Renee.
Yeah, I can't
Yeah,
hear
I
her
think we
too.
lost Renee. But yes, we definitely are about like 10 minutes over time. No, thank you so much to everyone for joining this discussion in this webinar, and thank you to all the panelists, and thank you for everyone who organized this. And
show the video. Show the video.
Yeah, we'll be concluding, yes, with a video by Dr. Win called "Freedom is Not Free." And Dr. Win is currently working as the Director of Development and Marketing for Institute of Civic Education in Vietnam. And in 2002, she was appointed by President Barack Obama to serve on the board of Vietnam Education Foundation, a national foundation established by US government to foster the relationship between United States and Vietnam through education. and she's also executive director of Lyceum, Life Skills and Professionals Development for Success.
Before we showing that video, I'm gonna showing the AAUC President and Vice President video.
Oh.
Hi, my name is S.K. Lo. I'm a Chinese American from Hong Kong. I came to this country as a teenager to study physics and mathematics, and I got my PhD in theoretical physics. After that, I spent 1 year in Japan as a postdoc. And coming back to the US, I worked for Honeywell in the defense research area, and where I also got my master's degree in strategic management. Since then, I started 2 centers in Kumon and have over 1,000 students. That's where I learned also my people skill to deal with people on a day-to-day basis. I'm very honored to be elected as the first president of AAUC, and I believe this organization is really needed to unite all the voices from Asian Americans and Pacific Islander, so we can have a seat at the table and be able to make some changes in the inequality in the system. And I want all of you to join forces with me. Thank you.
Greetings. This is Piyush Agarwal, Vice President of AAUC. I'm a former United Nations expert, and I retired as superintendent of schools. After that, I did the business. It was very successful. I've been working to unite the Asian community for the last 40 years. And that mission still continues. Still, I'm working with AAUC to make sure that we Asians stay united. Efforts will continue. Let's hope for the positive results. Thank you very much. Greetings to all of you.
I was a refugee, escaping Vietnam those years after the war. Freedom is not free. In Vietnam, we paid by risking our lives at sea. Out of 1 million who try, only 1/3 make it to America. I was the lucky one who arrived and make a new life here. Freedom is not free. I'm now a proud Vietnamese American. My motherland gave me birth and identity, but it is America who gave me freedom and opportunity to blossom and be the best I can be. Freedom is not free. As a citizen of this beautiful country, it is a privilege and an honor to volunteer, to serve, and to give. Freedom is not free. It is our responsibility to keep the flame of humanity. More than ever, this spirit of humanity needs to be honored as we and the whole world are entering the period of coping with COVID-19 global pandemic. More than ever, we need to honor these values of compassion, of kindness, of love, mutual collaboration so that we can develop innovative solutions and develop community resiliency in the upcoming months. I believe in America's deepest value of respect, human dignity, and justice for all. I believe that hardship comes with opportunities, and we will all come out together stronger, more resilient, and more grounded. Freedom is not free.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Nguyen. I know, Renee, you got cut off at your last statement. Would you like to finish your thought?
Oh, that's okay. I know we're running late, but I apologize. My Wi-Fi just died.
Oh, okay. No,
Happen.
no, thank you all. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you for everyone.
Awesome job. Hey, awesome job, man. You did really good.
We're still going. Thank you, I appreciate it. And thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to all the speakers and everyone that submitted your reflections for the webinar participation. And really appreciate the support from the CL USA, Ding Ding TV, and all coalition member organizations. So many. So thank you all. And I hope we can all, go out, have these tough conversations, and really work to unite our community so that we can all move forward together. Thank you so much.